So once very good evening all of you. Once again I am welcome you all in the of the conference. The topic name is adolescent with recurrent bloody diarrhea and weight loss. I want to introduce Dr. Malti ma'am. Dr. Malti ma'am is MD DCH, DM and MNA MS. I hand over to the ma'am for conducting this session in this case. Thank you ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Natwar, for that introduction. Good afternoon, viewers. On behalf of my team, I wish to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to discuss an important problem, an adolescent with recurrent bloody diarrhea and weight loss. We have with us the team, Dr. Rohan Malik from Delhi. Also have Dr. Maya, who's done her MBBS, MD, DNB, MRCPH and MRCP. Going to the case scenario, Maya and Rohan, you can see that this is a 12-year-old, 9-month-old adolescent who has presented to the pediatric department last year, 2019, with recurrent bloody diarrhea for 6 months, loss of weight for 3 months. She also had abdominal pain for 2 months and fever for 1 month. The only significant past history was a perianal abscess at the age of 10.5 years, for which an incision and drainage was done. Details of this history: the bloody diarrhea, the child used to pass stools 4 to 5 per day. The majority, it was small in volume, but occasionally it was large. Stools were mixed with blood, at times frank blood. The bleeding would be just about 1 to 2 teaspoons full per episode. Nocturnal disturbance had been noticed over the last 2 weeks. She had been treated with 3 courses of antibiotics. There was a significant weight loss of 3 kilos lost over the last 3 months. And the mother said that she was complaining of dull abdominal pain, more in the periumbilical and left lower quadrant, but which could get relieved by defecation, but occurred more or less the whole day. A low-grade fever, intermittent, had been noticed for the last 1 month. There was no history of vomiting, abdominal distension, pedal edema. There was no history of oral ulcers, recurrent respiratory infections, arthralgia, jaundice, skin lesions. The father had been treated for pulmonary tuberculosis 5 years ago. There was no family history of inflammatory bowel disease. She had not attained menarche, but she was unable to attend school regularly because of these problems. So summing up, I think you would all agree that here this adolescent has a chronic illness. There is a history suggestive of a large bowel diarrhea, small volume with blood, but could be associated with a small bowel diarrhea also, because at times she did have large stools. There was significant weight loss. There's a past history of a perianal abscess. The father has pulmonary TB. There seems to be some symptoms of systemic disease and the fever. So with this history, I would like to ask Dr. Rohan, with this history, Dr. Rohan, can you exclude some common diagnosis?
Thank you, ma'am. Just because this is a bloody diarrhea, essentially, which is chronic, with some history of small bowel involvement, definitely we should not think of something common like celiac disease, because mostly it involves small bowel. There is no blood in the stool. And because there is blood in the stool, this is definitely organic, so not irritable bowel syndrome or something like that. And this age is a little bit too late for food allergy. Younger infants, you can think of food allergy and colitis. But this age group, not food allergy, more likely I would think of inflammatory bowel disease and whether ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, and maybe intestinal tuberculosis, although this amount of blood in the stool is not very typical of TB. So I would keep inflammatory bowel disease, because adolescent patient, blood in stools, abdominal pain, I would keep IBD as a first differential in this case. And maybe, of course, sometimes you can have immune deficiencies with secondary infections. So that can also be considered, but lower down the order.
So So I think Dr. Rohan has given a very good differential diagnosis, and he's clearly excluded some diagnosis. He's given 3 I's for us to remember: inflammatory bowel disease, intestinal tuberculosis, and immune deficiencies. So on examination of this child, marking her weight and height on the IAP growth chart, we see that she has a weight and height of a 25th centile, mild pallor, no significant lymphadenopathy, no pedal edema. Abdomen, there was no organomegaly, no mass, no free fluid. Perineal examination just showed a small scar at the posterior aspect. There was a sentinel skin tag and there was a fissure in ano. Investigations. The hemoglobin was 9.8 grams per cent. WBC count was normal. Platelet count was high, 5,43,000 cells per cubic millimeter. ESR was elevated 84 millimeters per hour. CRP was elevated 48 milligrams per deciliter. The transaminases were normal, sugar, creatinine normal. Total protein was borderline low, but the albumin was low, 2.8 grams per deciliter. Immunoglobulin profile was normal. Tissue transglutaminase antibody was less than 4 IU per ml. Her X-ray chest was normal. Manto was 10 millimeters. HIV was negative. Motion examination showed occult blood positivity, and RBCs was seen more than 30 per high power field, no parasites. Ultrasound of the abdomen was done. The solid organs were normal, but no free fluid, no nodes, but there was a thickened loop seen in the left iliac fossa. So Dr. Maya, in the investigation, we usually see the results which are abnormal because the lab themselves highlight that and send it to us. But here you find there are some results which are normal. Is there any relevance for that? Can we exclude some diagnosis? And I just want you to comment on the X-ray also. A normal X-ray, does it exclude a child from having intestinal TB? Will ultrasound ever help us to diagnose luminal pathology? We know it is useful for solid organs. What is your comment on luminal pathology? Yes, Maya.
Yes, ma'am. This child actually, if you look at, does have some of the investigations normal. This actually helps us to exclude some of the differentials which Rohan has already put across. So first of all, we'll take one by one. The first one is the immunoglobulin profile. The immunoglobulin profile, if you see, basically we're looking at the primary immunodeficiencies, especially the B cell type, and the common is the common variable immunodeficiency. So where you would have a low IgG and plus either a low IgA or a low IgM. So these they can sometimes present with symptoms of colitis and can have a manifestations like Crohn's disease. So you have to be with this at least this normal immunoglobulin profile helps us to exclude at least a B cell type of primary immunodeficiency. Now, tissue transglutaminase being low helps us to exclude celiac disease. HIV helps us to, a negative test helps us to exclude acquired immunodeficiencies. Now, moving on to the next question, that is, can we have a normal chest X-ray when you are suspecting ileocecal tuberculosis or intestinal tuberculosis? Especially in this child, there is a history, family history of pulmonary tuberculosis as well. So actually, the answer is no. X-ray chest can be normal in up to 30% of children who have intestinal tuberculosis. Now, moving on to the next question, that is, how does ultrasound abdomen contributes to the diagnosis of an intestinal pathology? Ultrasound is actually quite a sensitive and very easily available test in our diagnostic algorithm. So, but however, it is not the findings are not non-specific. Basically, what you would see generally would be a thickened loop, which if you see in Crohn's disease, you may find thickened bowel loops intervening with normal bowel loops. Sometimes it can also be seen in intestinal tuberculosis as well as in lymphoma. In intestinal tuberculosis, the predominant site is an ileocecal involvement, so you tend to see this thickened bowel loops more often in the right iliac fossa. Another important thing which you could pick up is the presence of mesenteric lymph nodes. It can be seen in both intestinal tuberculosis and in Crohn's. However, in intestinal tuberculosis, these nodes tend to be more larger. They tend to be multiple. They could also be conglomerate or calcified nodes, which could give us a clue. And sometimes they may be associated with thickened omentum as well in intestinal tuberculosis. Another important finding is the presence of a free fluid in the abdomen. When you have a free fluid, that is a pointer towards intestinal tuberculosis than to Crohn's.
Thank you, Maya. So with this history and investigations, and Dr. Rohan has given you the 3 eyes, from your point of view, do you think you can now come closer to the diagnosis?
So here, if you look at the history, we have an adolescent girl who has a chronic illness, which has been going on for 2 years, which is substantiated also by her growth faltering, her delayed puberty, and this in association with the presence of bowel symptoms, a colonic plus minus small bowel involvement, along with the presence of systemic symptoms, along with the associated perianal disease, and the investigations which showed an elevated inflammatory markers with associated features probably of malabsorption like hypoalbuminemia and anemia. I would keep my first differential as Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, especially Crohn's disease, and much lower down. Even though this child has a family history of pulmonary tuberculosis, I would like to keep it much lower down and keep Crohn's as my first differential. Crohn's, but IBD as my first differential.
Thank you. So Dr. Rohan, now I would just like you to comment on that importance of a growth chart. Are we just adding a growth chart in this presentation, or is it important? Also now, I think you looked at all the abnormal results. Please comment on that and on the stool report.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Stool chart is very, very important, especially if you are thinking of IBD, the growth chart, because it can show you a decreasing growth velocity, or if a child is falling off the growth parameters. And often this is the first manifestation of pediatric IBD growth, which is different from an adult IBD. So growth monitoring by pediatricians is very important, even in an adolescent. Now, the other things which you can just pick up on some very simple investigations on this child are, one is that he has anemia, which is common in inflammatory bowel disease, also in TB, mostly iron deficiency. And then others is that markers for inflammation are up. The platelet count is an inflammatory marker. High platelet count is seen in inflammation. Also CRP is positive. Both these things can be seen in Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or TB. And then the albumin was low. Now albumin can be low in either because of nutritional issues or more commonly, if you have a large surface involvement of the colon, as in ulcerative colitis or Crohn's colitis or TB, then it causes protein losing enteropathy. You lose protein through the gut. So whenever you have low total protein, low albumin, and there is no urine, there is no protein in the urine, always think that there is like some colonic disease where she is losing protein. And of course, stool occult blood was positive, showing that there is it is also a sort of an inflammation, showing inflammation in the bowel, showing that the blood loss is there. So overall, there is growth faltering, inflammation, and bowel involvement in this case.
So I think both Dr. Maya and Dr. Rohan have come closer to a diagnosis, and they have just said it could be pediatric inflammatory bowel disease, high possibility of Crohn's. They've kept ulcerative colitis because of the bleeding, and because we live in India, intestinal TB, the ulcerative type has also been considered. So what is this pediatric IBD? I would just like to give a few points for the viewers. It is an idiopathic chronic inflammatory disease of the GIT characterized by remissions and exacerbations. It's a very important cause of morbidity and mortality. The two important entities are Crohn's disease and UC. The global incidence, including India, it is on the rise. The etiopathogenesis is complex, but it is an interplay of a genetic susceptibility, an immune dysregulation, and an altered environment. The altered environment can be within the bowel. It could be a luminal antigen or a microbe, or it could be an environmental trigger. When you look at the PIBD incidence, throughout the world, PIBD is now being reported. It ranges from 2 to even 24 per 100,000. And India has been shaded in a cream color, indicating though the incidence is low, it is on the rise. And therefore, it is probably around 3 per 100,000. I think Maya and Dr. Rohan will remember our study which we did between 2016 and 19. And this is the article which is before publication. It has been brought here. And it is a very nice study which was done with 9 centers from India, 3 public and 6 private. This, we are just showing it because we want to highlight that pediatric IBD is also seen in India and is on the rise. So we had total of 325 cases, and the conclusion in that was that the disease location and phenotype was very similar to the children from the West. 20 years ago, we were thinking that pediatric IBD or IBD does not exist in India, but now we see that we do have IBD in India. And another study earlier showed that, yes, the majority of them are between 10 to 15 years. And this is a very important slide which we should remember, that Crohn's disease can involve any part of the GI tract from the mouth to the anus. And the most important is the skip lesions and multiple lesions and the transmural involvement, whereas ulcerative colitis is a disease limited to the colon and involves only the mucosa and submucosa. So Dr. Maya, suppose you think the diagnosis is pediatric inflammatory bowel disease. Is it necessary to differentiate between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease? And is it possible to differentiate between UC and CD? Can a pediatrician differentiate clinically and with the available investigations?
So I'll take up the second question, whether is it possible to differentiate, and can I have the previous slide? Yeah. I'll take it the second question first. That is it possible to differentiate between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease? Yes, it is possible to differentiate between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease to some extent, though the final confirmation is based on endoscopy and biopsy. Now, if you look at the symptomatology, the systemic symptoms like fever is more often seen in Crohn's disease. However, presence of frank blood in stools is more in favor of ulcerative colitis. However, if you have a Crohn's disease with colonic involvement, then you could still have blood in stools. Diarrhea is seen in both ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. However, presence of an abdominal pain is more in favor of Crohn's disease. So also, if you have growth faltering, presence of perianal disease are all more in favor of Crohn's disease. So if you look at our case also, she did have systemic symptoms, she did have abdominal pain, she had growth faltering, she had perianal abscess. However, the odd point is the presence of blood in stools, which we could still explain by the presence of a Crohn's colitis and associated colonic involvement in Crohn's. Now, moving on to the second question, is it important to differentiate between them? Yes, it is very important to differentiate between Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, because if you look at the natural history of ulcerative colitis, it is predominantly a colonic disease with a mucosal involvement. And the complications are, it could be hemorrhage or toxic megacolon. And apart from medical management, there are times when we need to go for surgery, that is the total proctocolectomy. Then actually that surgery is a definitive treatment because it removes the entire colon and thus the disease focus is removed. However, if you look into Crohn's disease, it is actually a more extensive disease with pan-GI involvement. That is, it can involve anywhere from the mouth to the anal canal. So because of this, it can have small bowel involvement. Those children tend to have associated malabsorption. They tend to have more of growth retardation. They would have associated features like anemia and hypoalbuminemia more. And also, if you look at the complications, there is a transmural involvement in Crohn's disease, they tend to be complicated more by the presence of fistulas, perianal abscess. They tend to have stricturing disease, which would subsequently cause intestinal obstruction. And surgery is preferably not one of the treatment modalities unless you end up with a complication like a stricture or a perforation or something like that. Now, so the answer is it is important to differentiate between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's because their natural history of disease is different, the clinical course of the disease, the complications are different, and so once you are able to differentiate between the two, you can optimize the management. You can also prognosticate to some extent.
Thank you, Maya. So now we come to intestinal TB. This is our national disease, and it is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. The disease, that means the etiology is more specific. It mimics Crohn's disease, and that is why it is brought into this presentation, not only in the clinical presentation, but also radiologically, endoscopically, and histopathological features. They share some common features. And incidence of TB definitely is several times higher. I will show you the global map. But now what is happening is there is a rise of IBD in the TB endemic areas. So it creates a problem to differentiate between Crohn's disease and tuberculosis. And this is the map of tuberculosis where we find India is leading. Second, actually, 200 to 299 cases per 100,000, which is very high. And suppose we start having increase of IBD also in our country, you see what the problems will be, because they are two different diseases, but they share features. So treatment is going to be different. In tuberculosis, there's a finite therapy, but in treatment of Crohn's disease, we may be using immunomodulators, and that is only going to flare up silent or active TB. And so this is a problem, and we all continue to find out how to differentiate between TB and Crohn's disease. So Dr. Rohan, now we know it is necessary. Is it possible to differentiate clinically between ITB and Crohn's disease? I think from the beginning you are giving some clues. And also pediatricians would like to know whether there will be some non-invasive test before they send a child for endoscopy. Someone has told them there is a test called fecal calprotectin. Will this test help to differentiate between TB and IBD, and in IBD between UC and CD? Yes, Dr. Rohan.
Thank you, ma'am. So it can be very difficult to differentiate between Crohn's and TB. They can look exactly the same. Whatever data we have, I think this study is from PGI where Sumit and Anshu ma'am had looked at data, and there was another study from AIIMS by Dr. Makharia published in AGG. So basically both can have chronic diarrhea, but chronic, not so common in TB, diarrhea and blood in the stool, not so common in TB. Not to say that it cannot occur. In any given patient, it can occur, but not as common, especially frank blood in the stool, not as common as PIBD. And in this series, they had obstruction more commonly in ileocecal tuberculosis, but this can occur in Crohn's also because they both involve the ileocecal region, and that can cause subacute obstruction. Ascites, of course, more likely in TB because they have peritoneal involvement, but if you have a malnourished child, they might have a little bit of ascites in Crohn's. And of course, extra intestinal manifestations like arthritis, erythema, pyoderma gangrenosum, all these are more common in IBD. But overall, it's sometimes almost impossible to differentiate. This test is now available commercially, calprotectin. And basically it is a protein that you measure in the stool. This protein is normally present in the neutrophils. So if there is increased neutrophils in the gut and this protein spills over into the stool, and you can measure this, and normal cutoff is 50. But this is a non-specific marker of inflammation. If there is any sort of inflammation due to TB or Crohn's or UC, this marker will be up. Where it is useful is one, if you have a child with chronic complaints, you're not sure whether you should do colonoscopy, you might be thinking it is maybe only just IBS, then definitely this is a good tool to look at inflammation. And second is when you're actually treating patients of IBD, it's a good for looking at serially what the colonic inflammation is like, and you don't have to do colonoscopy each time. So for monitoring therapy, but to differentiate, does not differentiate between TB, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis. But it's a very useful marker. We use it more and more now.
Thank you, Rohan, for emphasizing that you cannot differentiate between the IBD types and you cannot differentiate between tuberculosis and CD, but definitely it will help us to defer colonoscopy if it is more like irritable bowel syndrome and you think it's a functional GI disorder when the level may be less than 50. So I think up to now, a pediatrician will be able to manage this child. They will be able to clinically say, yes, there is something more. At this point of time, I think they should refer, all pediatricians who are viewing should refer to the pediatric gastroenterologist, because we are able to do endoscopy, which is very, very important, which was stressed by Maya. The endoscope is our stethoscope. And we know that there are some characteristic features between UC, Crohn's disease, intestinal TB. You need not know every point in this, but all that you have to see is in ulcerative colitis, we usually see a continuous inflammation as shown in this slide, and you will see friability, ulcerations, and the loss of the vascular pattern. Whereas when you look at Crohn's disease, you will see more linear ulcerations, and you will have some irregular ulcerations. There will be skip areas. In between, it may look normal, and you will have nodularity. Whereas intestinal TB, it is more localized, the ulcers are more transverse, whereas the ulcers are more longitudinal. This is relative and this still may be difficult, but if you have a localized involvement only of the ileocecal region, it is more likely to be tuberculosis than Crohn's disease. And if there are transverse ulcers, a left-sided involvement is rare in tuberculosis. And histopathology will definitely help us. If there are characteristic changes in ulcerative colitis, we see this crypt abscess and we see a lot of inflammatory cells, we see cryptitis. The crypt distortion should be there to say it is chronic. In Crohn's disease, you see this epithelioid granuloma and you see the architectural alteration. Whereas in intestinal TB, if you see caseation, then it is the hallmark. In both Crohn's disease and in intestinal TB, you have granuloma, but the caseation will help you to identify intestinal TB. So whenever we take biopsy, because we live in India, we have to send for smear AFB, we send for AFB culture, gene expert for TB. As I told you, we wish the child had intestinal TB rather than Crohn's disease because it's a finite therapy. And if you're lucky, you might be able to even see the AFB, which on Ziehl-Neelsen staining. So I'm sure Dr. Rohan and Maya said, even though we have made a diagnosis on endoscopy, we always do imaging of the small bowel because the diagnosis of pediatric inflammatory disease is a combination of these findings. There are some findings which are very clinical, obvious, which like this, if you have in tuberculosis, it's more localized. You see the cecal thickening and the terminal ileal thickening, and elsewhere it's normal. You can see the terminal ileum alone thickening, and along with that, you see this necrotic lymph nodes. If you get necrotic lymph nodes, as mentioned by Maya, because the nodes will be there in Crohn's disease, but they are very small disease, they are rarely necrotic. So these are the features you see in TB, whereas in Crohn's disease, the radiologist will tell you that there is a long segment involvement. Here, do you see the thickening of the small bowel loop, the thickening and the enhancement, and then you have an ascending colon stricture here, and also involvement of another portion of the small bowel here, and this is known as the Combs sign, and you could have. So there are some changes, and we find that Maya, in this child, when we did upper GI endoscopy and colonoscopy, these were the findings. So could you just comment on this and I'll tell you the report?
The first picture is actually an upper GI endoscopy, and what is shown as the andrum. You can see that there is some erythema and then some superficial erosions, which is suggestive of antral gastritis. And upper GI endoscopy is presently recommended in the initial workup of all patients whom you are suspected to have Crohn's disease. Now, the second picture is actually at the ileocecal region. We can see that the ileocecal valve is apathless and open, and at the 3 o'clock position, you can see there is a deep ulceration. Now, the third picture is actually a colonic mucosa, which shows discrete aphthoid ulcers, multiple discrete aphthoid ulcers with in a background of normal mucosa. Now, if you look at the fourth, fifth, and sixth picture, it actually shows multiple deep ulcers at various in various scattered throughout with normal intervening mucosa, which is suggestive of skip lesions. So overall, the whole picture is more favoring Crohn's disease.
Thank you, Maya. So yes, like she said, it was Crohn's disease, and we had sent for a gene expert also. The histopathology, it showed granuloma, smear AFP negative, and gene expert was also negative. And we did have on CT also thickening of the ascending colon enhancement. And therefore, the final diagnosis in this adolescent is Crohn's disease. The extent and classification is the next thing which you should write: ileocolonic with a perianal abscess. Severity, PCDI score 36, no intestinal complications, no extra intestinal manifestations. In the management, we always remember that IBD is a team management, and therefore pediatricians who are viewing this presentation, you are very important in this management. And the general management is we do medical management where we do induction of remission, just like you treat a leukemia. Then we have maintenance. For induction, you can either use steroids, and sometimes we have to use biologicals. Maintenance is usually with azathioprine or immunomodulators. Surgery has already been mentioned by Maya, that may be a total colectomy in UC. Nutrition, it plays a very, very important role, and there are people who swear that exclusive elemental nutrition is enough for a mild Crohn's disease. This child we know has pediatric Crohn's, so the induction of remission, to go in detail, if it's a severe disease, you go to steroid 1 milligram per kilogram per day, and then you give it and taper it over 4 to 6 weeks. If it is mild, you can start with exclusive enteral nutrition. If there's no response in 2 weeks, you have to go to steroids. And then if steroids don't work, induction, as I mentioned earlier, can be given with infliximab or with adalimumab. Maintenance of remission is always with azathioprine. You do not give steroids for maintenance. And even exclusive enteral nutrition cannot be maintained for maintenance. Maintenance is easily done by azathioprine. And in those with severe disease, especially fistulizing disease, moderately severe, are not responding to steroids, you may have to induce with biologicals and continue biologicals. So in this adolescent, induction was done with steroids and with 5-aminosalicylic acid. Maintenance was done with azathioprine 1.5 milligram per kilogram. But while on therapy, she developed a perineal abscess with a draining fistula, and therefore she had to be started on adalimumab. Nutrition was monitored and supplement given with polymeric formula, iron, calcium supplements added, and she had to be maintained on biologicals, adalimumab every 2 weeks. But 1 year later, so this year, she came last year, 1 year later, she has attained what is known as the deep remission or the mucosal healing. And that means there's not only a clinical improvement, the blood parameters have improved. Endoscopically, there's been an improvement, and histopathologically, there has been an improvement. So the take-home messages for all the viewers is pediatric IBD is an important cause of morbidity and is prevalent in India, very, very important. And when should pediatricians suspect inflammatory bowel disease in children is when they have chronic diarrhea, when they have bloody diarrhea, when they have growth failure, when they have chronic abdominal pain, especially with red flag signs, or they present with extra intestinal manifestations. early referral, like this child, it has to be done to the pediatric gastroenterologist, and that is very, very important. And remember that ileocolonoscopy is safe and helps in definitive diagnosis. Don't postpone this because you're scared about the procedure. And management, as mentioned earlier, involves a multidisciplinary approach. And we would like to thank you all for listening and watching our presentation.